Ladies and gentlemen, wishing you a peaceful night full of rest and relaxation tonight. We're going to travel back to a time when the cold seas of the north churned with long ships, sagas echoed in smoky halls, and women, yes, women, held the power to say yes or no when it came to marriage. In Viking society, a woman's voice in matters of the heart wasn't just heard, it often carried surprising weight. You might imagine battle-hardened warriors making all the decisions. But here's the twist. Sometimes it was the woman stirring the stew who was calling the real shots. Imagine waking up in a timber longhouse, fire crackling low, the scent of dried fish mingling with the cold. You're wrapped in wool, tucked beside your sisters and cousins under thick furs. Outside, frost paints the world white, and inside, everyone's breath clouds in the dim morning light. You rise not with fear of being traded like a pawn, but with the knowledge that if marriage talks begin today, your opinion will matter. That was the lived reality of many Viking women. Not queens or goddesses, just ordinary women in rough tunics with calloused hands and strong wills. Now, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to know where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. Something tells me you'll be ready to settle in for tonight's journey. Now dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've heard the stereotypes: Viking men with wild beards and even wilder tempers dragging women off like sacks of grain. But peel back the Hollywood drama, and Viking society reveals a more complex picture. One where women had specific rights, and those rights weren't just symbolic. They were written into Norse law, upheld by custom, and remembered in sagas. It wasn't paradise. Mind you, you still had to churn butter, fetch water, and probably help clean up after a goat. But when it came to marriage, you had more say than your medieval sisters in France, England, or even the Byzantine Empire. Take the Gragas, the medieval Icelandic law code. Dry reading, yes, but incredibly revealing. Within its curling runes and dusty clauses lies evidence that women had the legal right to accept or refuse a suitor. Consent was a legal requirement, not just a polite suggestion. If your father or brother tried to force you into a marriage without your say, that union could actually be contested and annulled. Even in the Viking Age, that was remarkable. While most of Christian Europe treated marriage as a family arrangement, where the bride's feelings were as important as a wooden spoon's, Norse culture often required her willing agreement. Now let's not get carried away. You weren't exactly running around with a bouquet interviewing candidates on your own terms, like it was a Nordic version of The Bachelorette. Your family still had influence, often a lot of it. But unlike many contemporaneous societies, your voice held weight. Picture this: your father presents you with a match. A landowning farmer, decent beard, good sheep. You're not sold. Maybe he chews too loudly. You say no. And the incredible part, that no could stick. Historians still argue whether this female agency was truly widespread or more aspirational than actual. Some point to saga heroines like Gudrun Osvifer's daughter, who chooses between 4 husbands over her lifetime as evidence of autonomy. Others wonder if such characters were exceptional and not the norm. Were these stories wishful thinking, or a reflection of reality in certain regions like Iceland or coastal Norway, where isolation made women's labor and opinions essential to survival? Regardless of how common it was, there's no doubt that Viking women had more control than many might guess. And not just noble women. Even freeborn peasant women could participate in decisions about their futures. As a young woman in a Viking village, you'd be taught skills like spinning, cooking, brewing ale, but you'd also be quietly absorbing the social rhythms around marriage. You'd know which families had wealth, which sons were promising, and which men maybe had fleas. And most importantly, you'd know that your choice mattered not just as a whisper in the corner, but as a part of the actual legal and social process. And the men. Well, they weren't just out swinging axes and expecting brides to fall into their arms. A Viking man who wanted to marry had to prove himself not just as a warrior, but as someone who could provide land resources and protection. He'd bring gifts, consult with her kin, maybe even compose a verse or two if he was feeling poetic. And if the woman wasn't impressed, sorry. Eric, better luck next spring. This wasn't courtly love like in Arthurian legend, but it was still a dynamic of mutual interest and negotiation. The importance of the woman's approval wasn't just about romance, it had practical roots. Viking women often brought dowries into the marriage, livestock, land rights, household goods, and even servants. These weren't just tokens, they were assets. A smart man didn't just marry for love or looks, he married a partner who could bolster his economic standing. And in turn, she had reason to choose a husband who'd respect her role in running the household. You weren't just picking a man, you were picking a co-captain for the long voyage ahead, whether that meant managing a farmstead or settling a new outpost in Iceland. And yet, for all this surprising agency, Viking women still lived in a world shaped by men. Raids, politics, war, they were overwhelmingly male domains. But inside the longhouse, women held sway. They held the keys to the chest of silver. They oversaw food storage, animal care, and textile production, critical elements of survival. And perhaps because of that indispensable domestic authority, their voices in marriage negotiations weren't just tolerated, they were expected. It's tempting to romanticize this era, to imagine it as a land of fierce, freckled feminists fighting for their love lives, one battle at a time. The truth is more textured, more earthy. A Viking woman's life was full of hardship, sure, but it also had choice. Not total freedom, not modern equality, but something real, something meaningful, something that still whispers through the sagas and laws left behind. So as you settle under your own blankets tonight, warmed not by a turf fire, but maybe a flickering screen, think about the woman in that far-off village, choosing her husband, not being chosen. And know that even in the chilly, storm-swept world of the Vikings, the human heart still managed to speak for itself. You're standing at the edge of a fjord. The morning mist is thick, clinging to your skin like the wool of an unshorn sheep. Behind you, a longhouse breathes smoke from its turf-covered chimney. And ahead, you can hear the low voices of men discussing trade or maybe marriage. But unlike most women of your time elsewhere in the world, you're not excluded from these talks. You're not property. You're a participant. In Viking society, marriage was not simply an exchange of goats for a daughter. It was a carefully considered alliance with more nuance than you might expect from a people often caricatured as axe-swinging brutes. You see, Viking marriage was not merely a personal contract between two lovebirds. It was a formal agreement involving families' wealth and often land. But surprisingly, this didn't mean the woman had no say. In fact, her consent was not only sought, but legally necessary in many cases. The Norse had a very particular view of the world, and they were pragmatic in ways that might surprise you. The strength of the household depended on mutual respect. If a woman didn't approve of her prospective husband, that imbalance could threaten the whole community dynamic. That's why the idea that marriage was a mere transaction doesn't quite hold up. Yes, dowries and bride prices existed. Yes, families had to agree. But the bride wasn't just a silent figure dressed in linen, nodding on command. She was active in the process, and the rituals that unfolded reflected this. Historians have pored over legal texts like the Frostathing Law and Gragas, and although they're dry enough to put a goat to sleep, they're crystal clear about one thing: forced marriage was frowned upon. A marriage without the woman's consent could be dissolved, and in some places it was never valid to begin with. This doesn't mean every woman had total freedom, but in a world where many daughters were married off before they could spell their own names, it was a progressive stance. So how did these arrangements typically work? Picture this: you're of marrying age somewhere between 15 and 20. Give or take. Your father begins to receive visitors, men bearing gifts, not for him, but for you. A good husband candidate brings cattle, perhaps, a silver bracelet or two, maybe a small fleet of fishing rights. He speaks with your family, but he also speaks with you. You may not get to make the final call entirely solo, but your voice is not lost in the echo. If you disagree, it matters. Now, of course, power dynamics were fluid. A wealthier family might push harder. A particularly ambitious father might lean on his daughter's silence as tacit approval. And yet, the sagas, those rich, meandering oral stories, passed down through generations, showcase women who say no and make it stick. Sometimes it leads to drama, other times to unexpected alliances. Consent, while not universally respected, was embedded enough into the social consciousness that it wasn't an alien concept. There's also the matter of the munder, a kind of bride price paid by the groom's family. But this wasn't a fee to buy a wife. Rather, it was more like a security deposit. A way to show the groom was serious, financially stable, and able to support a household. The woman's family often kept this payment, ensuring that if the husband turned out to be a useless lump or, worse, abusive, she wouldn't be left penniless. It added another layer of protection to the arrangement and gave the woman's family incentive to prioritize her well-being. And then there's the dowry, or Heimenfilgia, literally the going-from-home gift. This was the woman's contribution to the marriage. Bedding, livestock, household goods, servants. These were hers, and they remained hers legally, even after the wedding. If things went south and the marriage was dissolved, she had a right to reclaim them. That's right, divorce wasn't some secret shameful word among the Vikings, but we'll get to that later. One peculiar detail you might enjoy: some marriage negotiations even included oaths before witnesses, sometimes taken with hands placed on the hilt of a sword or atop a symbolic stone. You and your suitor might stand there as solemn as two teenagers at a prom photo shoot, promising to care for one another, and promising also that you both agreed to this union. It's oddly sweet in a mossy, frostbitten kind of way. And love, ah yes, was there love? That's where things get murky. Historians still argue whether romantic affection played a role in Viking marriages. While arranged matches were common, saga literature is filled with longing gazes, whispered vows, and even heartbreak. Love might not have been the goal, but it certainly happened along the way. And when it did, the freedom to choose became all the more valuable. Imagine falling for a neighboring farmer's son. He's clever, he's kind, and his sheep don't smell too bad. In some societies, you'd be forbidden from even considering him. In Viking lands, you might actually have a chance to say yes. Of course, not everyone got a say. Slaves' thralls had no such luxury. They were often married or paired off at their owner's whims. This stark contrast reminds us that freedom was still a matter of class. The empowered Viking women we're talking about were usually freeborn and from reasonably secure households. That's why their rights, while notable, weren't universal. Still, the fact that these rights existed at all makes Viking society stand out. When compared to contemporary Europe, where noble women were often betrothed at the age of 8, Viking women emerge as surprisingly autonomous. They lived in a society that valued honor negotiation, and above all, balance, at least within the free classes. The rituals around marriage were an extension of that balance. They weren't perfect, but they allowed space for female agency in a way few early medieval societies did. So as you sit here tonight, wrapped in the warm hush of your own home, think about those Viking women listening to suitors over carved wooden tables, weighing their choices like generals considering alliances. Marriage wasn't just about love or land or family, it was about strategy. And Viking women, they played the game well. You're walking now down a narrow path lined with low stone walls. The sun is just beginning to rise behind the hills, casting a golden sheen over damp grass and thatched rooftops. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster complains loudly an ancient, feathery alarm clock. But here's what catches your attention: a woman upright and alert, commanding the household like a ship's captain on deck. She's not baking bread in a dainty apron or waiting obediently for her husband to return from a raid. No, she's taking stock of goods, issuing orders to servants, and possibly deciding which marriage proposal she'll entertain next for her daughter. Welcome to the Viking household, where women weren't ornamental background characters. They were anchors of daily life, and their power didn't vanish once they were married. In fact, in many ways, it only grew stronger. This wasn't your average patriarchal arrangement. Viking wives, particularly those from free families, wielded what you might call soft power, social, legal, and economic, and they wielded it with skill. Start with the key. Yes, literally, the key. A Viking woman often wore a set of keys attached to her belt or dress dangling near the waist like medieval bling. But this wasn't just symbolic. These keys unlocked chests, storerooms, and pantries. They signaled her authority over the domestic economy. In a world where food preservation could mean the difference between surviving winter and starving in it, that was no small thing. Inside the longhouse, she controlled the rhythm of life, what was cooked, how cloth was spun, where the wealth was stored. She could lend money, manage livestock, and handle the estate while her husband was away, which, given how often Viking men went raiding, trading, or dying in shipwrecks, meant she was essentially the CEO of the household for much of the year. One medieval chronicler from the British Isles even marveled that Viking women held sway as men do. A backhanded compliment, sure, but a telling one. Still, historians continue to debate just how deep that authority ran. Was it genuine power or just delegated responsibility? Was she respected or simply tolerated while the real decisions happened elsewhere? The truth likely falls somewhere in the middle. But what's certain is that she had rights, actual legal rights, that far exceeded those of her European contemporaries. Let's talk property. When a Viking woman married, she brought her dowry with her. And unlike in many other parts of the medieval world, that dowry remained hers. If the marriage ended, whether by death, divorce, or mutual dismay, she could reclaim it. Not only that, but any gifts her husband gave her during the marriage were also considered her personal property. Think of it like a medieval prenup, but one both parties actually respected. And yes, you heard that right, divorce. Viking women could initiate it. All they had to do was declare the separation in front of witnesses, often by saying something along the lines of, I divorce you 3 times at the front door in public view. Imagine that. You're fed up with your husband's late-night mead binges and his inability to clean his fish guts off the table. So you gather a few neighbors, shout your decision to the skies, and that's that. You're free. No court hearings, no dramatic showdowns with priests. Of course, this wasn't done lightly. Divorce came with consequences, especially if children were involved. And social pressure was still very real. But the legal mechanism was there, and it worked both ways. Viking society wasn't invested in trapping people in unhappy unions. They were practical. If a marriage was no longer productive emotionally, economically, or socially, it made sense to let it go. You might say they invented the concept of the conscious uncoupling minus the Instagram post. But don't let this freedom give you the wrong idea. There were still expectations, and not meeting them could lead to trouble. A woman was expected to be industrious, loyal, and fiercely protective of her household's honor. If she failed, say, by mismanaging the food stores or harboring a lover while her husband was away, she could face fines or public shame. In some extreme cases, things might get a little stabby. The sagas are full of dramatic stories after all. Still, for every tale of scandal, there are others of savvy negotiation and cool-headed leadership. One of the more entertaining details, women could act as matchmakers themselves. A mother might arrange her daughter's match with clear input from the girl, and maybe a bit of sly manipulation, too. Imagine 2 mothers discussing dowries over fermented herring, whispering about whose son still wets the bed and who's finally learned how to hunt something other than moss. And when it came to public life, Viking women weren't exactly shrinking violets. While they didn't typically hold formal political office, they could wield influence behind the scenes. Some even served as gaudy local chieftains in Icelandic settlements, though this was rare. More commonly, they held sway through land ownership and family alliances. A wealthy widow, for example, could become a serious power broker, orchestrating marriages and trade deals like a Scandinavian godmother. One fringe detail that might make you raise an eyebrow: archaeological digs have uncovered Viking women buried with weapons. This has sparked debate for decades. Were they warriors? Were the swords symbolic, or did someone just get confused in the afterlife luggage department? Historians still argue whether these graves indicate genuine combat roles or merely high status. But the very fact that it's plausible tells you something about how versatile Viking women could be. They weren't confined to one role. They were mothers, merchants, healers, and occasionally shield maidens. Their social contracts didn't end at the wedding altar. In many ways, marriage was just the beginning of their power, not the end of it. So tonight, as you drift deeper into the stillness, picture that longhouse again. The smoke curling into a sky pricked with stars. The woman inside tightening her grip on the keys at her belt. She is not waiting for rescue. She is the one keeping everything upright. And in the morning, when another suitor knocks at her daughter's door, you can bet she'll be the first to answer. The smell of hearth smoke still lingers in your hair as you follow the winding path beyond the village. Around you, the world is waking slowly. Cows stretch in their pens, a dog barks in the distance, and gulls wheel above the water. You reach a rise, and from there you can see ships in the harbor, longships, sleek and purposeful. Most are crewed by men, yes, but not all the people waving goodbye from the shore are simply waving. Some are planning, scheming, deciding who gets married to whom and when. Because Viking women weren't just passive observers of fate, they could shape it. And one of the most fascinating ways they did so through the concept of mord and et, or honor. and kinship. In Viking society, these weren't abstract ideals. They were daily realities that dictated behavior decisions, and yes, even marriage choices. You might think of honor today as a vague medieval chest-thumping ideal, but in Viking times it was deeply entwined with survival. If someone insulted your family, or worse, cheated your daughter out of a promised marriage, honor demanded a response, and that response didn't always involve axes. Sometimes it involved whitlaw, and a mother with a long memory and a sharper tongue than any blade. Let's say your sister was promised in marriage to a neighboring chieftain's son, but at the last minute, he backed out to marry someone richer. That's not just romantic disappointment, that's dishonor. And that dishonor could ripple through your entire family's standing. In some cases, a wronged family might demand weregild compensation in silver or goods. In other cases, they might pursue formal arbitration. And who often stood at the center of that negotiation? The women. Yes, in some parts of Scandinavia, especially in Iceland, women acted as mediators in legal disputes. They might not stand before the Viking legal assembly and shout laws from the mountaintop, but they could wield private influence. They could call in favors, pressure relatives, and in rare but documented cases, even bring cases to court themselves. And here's where marriage got strategic. Every union was a merging of not just people, but clans. That's why who you chose or didn't choose to marry mattered. It wasn't just about cattle or chemistry, it was about power. A woman's consent to marry a particular man might swing a feud into a truce or reignite old tensions. The sagas are full of moments where women are shown persuading their families, sometimes gently, sometimes with the full force of shaming language, to accept or reject a suitor. Consider Gudrun Osvifursdottir, a woman featured prominently in Laxdæla saga. She had 4 husbands over her life, and each marriage reflected a shift in her personal power and strategy. She didn't drift from man to man like a leaf in a stream. No, she navigated with a steady hand and sometimes a dagger behind her back. Gudrun's first marriage ends badly. Her second marriage, a strategic match that strengthens her family's standing. The third, a passionate one with tragic consequences. And by the fourth, she's one of the most influential women in the region. Historians still argue whether Gudrun was a real person or a semi-fictional construct. But either way, she embodies something very real, that women through marriage could shape the political and social map of their communities. And it wasn't just the elite women. Even among free farmers, women had expectations. A mother might groom her daughter to be a future husfreyja, literally house lady, a title that implied not just domestic skills, but social clout. Marrying a man of bad character wasn't just embarrassing. It was dangerous. It could ruin alliances and spark blood feuds. So when a daughter voiced her preference or her objections, it wasn't taken lightly. Let's imagine a quiet evening in a Viking longhouse. The fire crackles low. Your father lays out the proposal. Olaf's son wants your hand. He has 3 boats, a good set of sheep, and he only smells like fish on alternating days. He's a solid match. But you shake your head. You remind your father of the way Olaf's family wronged your cousin last winter, or how the last time you saw that son, he was mocking the old widow in the village square. Your father hesitates. He respects your judgment. And maybe your mother leans forward, her voice low but steady, reminding him that the family's honor is not worth risking for a pile of goats. And so the match is declined, not with violence, not with a duel, but with strategy. And sometimes a woman might use marriage itself as a peace offering. If 2 families were at odds, a carefully arranged union could signal reconciliation. Picture it like medieval diplomacy, but with fewer treaties and more fermented berries. You marry the rival clan's son, not because you swoon at the sight of his long beard, but because your marriage could end a cycle of revenge killings. Now that's commitment. Fringe fact time. Some sources hint that magical practices may have played a role in matchmaking. A woman might consult a vulva, a seeress skilled in Cider Norse magic, to interpret omens or dreams before accepting a proposal. These spiritual advisors were often women themselves, wielding immense cultural respect, and maybe a bone staff or two. While hard to verify, it adds a deliciously mystical layer to the courtship process. So while Viking men were off rowing themselves into early graves or haggling over walrus tusks in foreign ports, Viking women were back home doing something just as crucial, weaving alliances, protecting family honor, and building futures, not just for themselves, but for generations to come. And you'd be right there with them, wouldn't you? Chin lifted, eyes sharp, listening carefully as your suitor speaks. You nod politely, smile even. But in your heart, you know you hold the real power here. You always have. The wind smells like salt and pine as you step outside your home, your longhouse, your domain. Behind you, the warmth of the hearth still clings to your wool cloak, but ahead lies the market path, and today, you're not just going to buy cheese or salted fish. You're headed to meet people, trade news, perhaps weigh in on a dispute, and if rumors are to be believed, hear about yet another marriage proposal for your cousin's daughter. Because in the Viking world, matchmaking wasn't a one-time event. It was a rolling strategy. You see, marriage wasn't just about love or lust, though both certainly played roles, especially if mead was involved. It was an ongoing process that evolved with the community, the clan, and changing fortunes. And Viking women, they weren't waiting to be picked like apples. They were observers, negotiators, and sometimes even the orchestrators behind the scenes. Let's follow a typical woman of standing. Let's call her Ragna as she navigates this world. Ragna isn't just a wife, she's the linchpin of her family's social strategy. Her husband is away trading walrus ivory, and her son is still too young to hold the family name in public negotiations. So when a neighbor stops by to propose a match between his niece and Ragna's nephew, it's Ragna who sits at the bench pouring ale, weighing each word like silver coins. She'll consider everything: the niece's skills, the uncle's reliability, the family's history of disputes, or ideally the lack thereof. She might even test the waters by casually mentioning the proposal to a passing merchant just to see how far gossip travels and how it's received. In a way, she's running a public relations campaign out of her pantry. And believe it or not, she's not just doing this for her family. In the Viking world, a woman's reputation for wisdom in these matters enhanced her value to the whole community. And what if Ragna disapproves? Maybe she knows the niece is lazy, or perhaps she remembers when that family shortchanged her cousin on a cheese deal 3 winters ago. She might stall with excuses about the harvest, or she might smile, tilt her head, and say with devastating politeness, "We'll consider it carefully," which in Viking diplomacy could mean anything from never to over my cold, dead body. Still, the pressure was real. For a woman, rejecting too many proposals without good cause could damage her family's prospects. She had to walk a fine line between protecting her kin and keeping alliances intact. And this is where some serious psychological fencing came into play. Jokes veiled compliments, subtle changes in seating order at the feast all tools in the negotiation toolkit. Historians continue to argue whether women like Ragna acted out of genuine power or were simply working within the only sphere they were allowed. But the answer may be less binary. Power is power even when it wears homespun wool and speaks softly over stew. And Viking society gave its women more tools than many other cultures of the time. One such tool, the bride price known as munder. This wasn't a purchase, as some might assume. It was a gesture from the groom's family to the bride's acknowledging the value of the match. Importantly, a portion of the munder often went directly to the bride herself, further proof that she wasn't just part of the furniture. She entered marriage with economic power in her own name. She could use that wealth, save it, or in some cases, even invest it. Imagine that Viking financial literacy brought to you by embroidered coin pouches. Now let's dip into a more fringe practice, the bridal test. Found in several sagas, this is where a prospective bride might set a challenge for her suitor. It could be something physical, proving strength, retrieving an item, defeating a rival, or something more clever. One tale tells of a woman who challenged her suitor to solve a riddle about wolves and honor. The message was clear: win my mind before you try to win my hand. Whether these stories reflect real-life customs or just good storytelling, they show us something important. Women were not simply given away. They were participants. And in the case of widows, they were often initiators. Viking widows had remarkable autonomy. Once their husbands died, and assuming no scandal lingered, they could manage property, arrange marriages for their children, and even remarry on their own terms. In fact, some widows became wealthier and more socially powerful than they had ever been as wives. A good example awed the deep-minded one of the early settlers of Iceland. After her husband's death, she built a ship, gathered followers, and sailed across the North Atlantic to start a new life. Deep-minded indeed. Some women even chose to remain single, especially if they were widowed, and had enough property to support themselves. That wasn't frowned upon. In fact, it could enhance their status. A woman who chose solitude over political marriage was seen as strong-willed, possibly even wise, and maybe just a little intimidating. Let's pause for a sensory moment. Picture the feast hall again just before dusk. The fire spits and pops in the center. The walls are lined with carved wooden panels, their designs darkened by generations of smoke. You're sitting beside your closest friend, sipping mead from a horn, watching as two families meet formally to discuss a potential marriage. No one is shouting. No one is crying. There is laughter, yes, but under it, a current of strategy. You glance across the fire and catch the eye of the bride-to-be. She smiles. You nod. You've both been prepared for this. Not pressured, prepared. And there's a difference. And one last fun detail. Viking couples had something called a morning gift. A personal gift from the groom to the bride the morning after the wedding. It might be land jewelry or a promise formalized with a handshake over breakfast. This wasn't transactional. It was deeply symbolic. It said, now that we are joined, here is your share of this union in your name. In many ways, it was more thoughtful than most modern prenups. So when you hear the old cliches about how women in the past were powerless, just remember Ragna, the matchmaking widow pouring ale and shaping destinies from her wooden bench. She knew what she was doing, and so do you. You're grinding barley in the early light of dawn, the soft scrape of stone on grain, almost hypnotic. Outside, the village is still. There's a rare hush, no shouting traders, no hammering smiths, no bleating sheep. Just the quiet before the day begins. But in your mind, things are already stirring. You're thinking about alliances, inheritances, land rights, and how women like you, yes, you have the power to nudge those stones in the stream of fate. Because when we talk about Viking women choosing their husbands, we can't forget the ultimate power move: divorce. That's right. While many medieval women across Europe were trapped in marriages like a squirrel in a barrel, Viking women had options. Not only could they say no to suitors, but if things went sideways after the wedding, they could, under specific conditions, end the marriage. And they didn't need a priest, a bishop, or even a dramatic sword fight to do it. You just had to do it properly. According to the Icelandic Gragas laws, a woman could divorce her husband by publicly declaring it in front of witnesses, no less. And she had to repeat the phrase at the threshold of their home and again by the marriage bed. Something like, "I declare myself separated from you," a legal formula. Not exactly the most romantic breakup, but practical. Effective. Final. Now here's where it gets spicier. The grounds for divorce were broader than you'd expect. Sure, infidelity was in there, but so was not managing the household properly or trying to move her out of the district against her will. Historians still argue whether emotional neglect or even lack of ambition counted as legitimate reasons, but the fact that these conversations existed at all tells you something. Viking women were not expected to suffer silently through bad marriages. They could walk away. And this wasn't just theory. We have saga accounts that tell of women exercising this right with clarity and confidence. One notable tale is that of Thorgerdur, who divorces her husband because he slaps her. In a moment of high drama, she makes her declaration before witnesses and walks away without losing her property or her dignity. In fact, she later remarries someone far more sensible. Upgrade complete. This legal empowerment gave Viking women a tool that many others across the globe would not gain for centuries. And with that tool came leverage. Think about it: if a husband knew his wife could leave him and still thrive, he had incentive to behave well, to listen, to collaborate. Otherwise, she'd be out the door taking her dowry and her formidable social connections with her. And she wouldn't be alone. Divorce didn't carry the same moral shame it did in later Christianized Europe. If anything, a woman who divorced badly behaved men was sometimes seen as wise, strong. The kind of woman you might ask to help mediate your family feud or pick a good spot for a new pasture. But, and this is important, divorce didn't always mean freedom from community expectations. Viking settlements were tight-knit. Everyone knew everyone. And while a divorced woman retained her rights, she also had to navigate the inevitable gossip side-eyes and subtle judgments. You had to be savvy, grounded, and ideally surrounded by people who respected you. Still, the ripple effects of this right were enormous. It meant that women didn't enter marriage with fear in their hearts. They knew going in that this was a partnership, not a sentence. They had a way out, and that changed the entire tone of Viking courtship. Now, let's wander down a slightly odd footpath: Viking nicknames. You've probably heard of some Eric the Red Herald Bluetooth. But women had nicknames too. Some were flattering: wise in tongue, gold voice, fair limbs. Others, less so. One saga tells of a woman named Thorgerd Butterbox, yes, Butterbox, who was famous for her sharp tongue and generous cooking. A strange combination, but one that made her memorable and respected. These nicknames mattered. They followed you like a resume, and sometimes they even helped in securing or dodging a marriage. A woman known as the quiet one, might be more desirable to a man seeking peace after years of feuding. One nicknamed Fist Breaker. Maybe not so much unless he valued a strong upper arm. Even poetry played a part in Viking matchmaking. Skald's court poets would sometimes compose verses praising or criticizing potential matches. Imagine hearing your name in a love poem recited over ale horns at a feast. If the words were kind, your chances soared. If the verse was scathing, you might have to move 3 fjords away to recover. And once married women often stayed active in public life. They hosted feasts, advised their husbands, and in some cases even took over the household entirely when their partners went off raiding or trading. A woman in charge wasn't a placeholder, she was the head of the house. The word husfreyja, meaning lady of the house, comes up again here. She had keys, she had authority, and yes, she had opinions. Imagine yourself now standing in your doorway, the wind lifting the edge of your shawl. You've just finished telling your soon-to-be ex-husband that the marriage is over. He nods quiet, respectful, maybe even relieved. A neighbor watches, eyebrows raised. But no one protests. This is your right. You've followed the rules, and you already know what comes next. You'll be fine. Better even. Because in this world, being a woman doesn't mean waiting. It means watching, choosing, and when necessary, walking away with your head high and your future intact. A hush settles over the longhouse as twilight creeps across the horizon, your fire casting soft flickers against the wooden beams. You're weaving nothing fancy, just mending a cloak torn on the last journey to the market. But your hands move without thought. What holds your attention tonight is your daughter. She's watching you from across the room, quiet but alert. Old enough now to understand what the sideways glances mean, what the whispered feasts and carefully measured silences hint at. There's a match on the horizon, and she knows it. What she doesn't know, what you once didn't know either, is how much say she'll truly have in the matter. Let's be clear, Viking daughters weren't auctioned off like sheep at a market. Yes, their families arranged marriages, but that doesn't mean the bride's opinion counted for nothing. In fact, Norse sagas give us several examples of young women openly voicing their preferences, and sometimes outright rejecting suitors. Take the story of Gudrun Osvifursdóttir, who appears in the Laxdæla saga. She's intelligent, charming, and has more romantic entanglements than a Norse soap opera. Her parents want one thing, but Gudrun is famously decisive. She doesn't always follow expectations, and she isn't punished for it. On the contrary, her choices, good or bad, are treated as meaningful. In one scene, she even seeks advice from a wise seeress before making a decision. And while the outcome is far from blissful, the process shows that women like her were seen as full agents in their own marital fate. Still, it wasn't as simple as saying, "No thanks." A refusal had to be couched in wisdom timing, and let's be honest, skillful politicking. You couldn't just shout across the mead hall that your suitor smelled like fermented herring and expected to get away with it. Instead, you might delay, make a counteroffer, or, as one clever saga heroine does, pretend to have already made a secret vow of celibacy. Historians still debate whether this freedom applied universally. Was it the norm, or an idealized literary flourish? The evidence is uneven. In some areas like Iceland, women had more documented rights and personal freedom. In others, particularly as Christian norms crept in during the 10th and 11th centuries, female autonomy seems to have shrunk. The shift from oral to ecclesiastical marriage traditions put more emphasis on male authority and clerical control. But rewind just a bit to the pre-Christian centuries, and the oral traditions sing a different tune. Daughters were taught to observe, to judge character, to ask sharp questions. And when it came time for marriage, their silence wasn't assumed, it was expected to be broken one way or another. Some fathers even sought their daughters' advice on alliances. After all, she'd be the one managing the household, making food stores last through winter, welcoming merchants or enemies at the threshold. A bad marriage wasn't just bad for her, it was bad for the entire kin group. It made sense to listen. And let's talk about matchmaking ceremonies for a moment. These weren't backroom dealings between fathers and uncles. They were feasts, public, often elaborate. A typical meeting might involve two families arriving at a neutral location, exchanging gifts and gossip over salted lamb and mead. The potential bride. She'd be seated at a place of honor listening, watching, sometimes speaking. Her opinion mattered because once the deal was struck, she'd carry its consequences. Now, step into the scene. Imagine being that young woman. Your dress is your finest blue-dyed wool, carefully embroidered at the collar. Your hair is braided in a pattern passed down through generations. You sit upright, nerves steady, back warmed by the fire. Your father glances your way, not to command, but to read your face. One raised eyebrow, one slight tilt of your head, and the message is received: this suitor may not be worthy. And what if you do approve? Then begins a ritual of subtle affirmation. Perhaps a toast offered with both hands, a joke told at your suitor's expense that you don't interrupt, or a slow, steady smile. In Viking society, so much was unsaid, and yet everything was clear. Let's bring in a slightly fringe tradition: dream interpretation. Some Viking families believed that a woman's dreams could reveal her true desires, or even her fated husband. It wasn't uncommon for a girl to say, "I saw him in a dream," and for the elders to nod solemnly, considering this meaningful input. Dreams weren't dismissed as nonsense. They were tools, sometimes even deal breakers. And while you might not have had an exact checklist to follow, the things you'd be thinking about were practical. Does he have land? Will he support my weaving work? Does he have enemies likely to burn down our house? The gods may have whispered to your ancestors, but you were still the one who had to clean up after the feast. Of course, like everything else in Viking life, this wasn't a utopia. Women had rights, yes, but they also had to know how to wield them. And some weren't lucky enough to have supportive fathers or understanding families. In those cases, marriages could be pressured. Alliances could be forced. But the very fact that we have so many stories of women resisting scheming and succeeding means those exceptions didn't go unchallenged. And let's not forget the role of female friends and kin. Cousins, sisters, even elderly aunts often played behind-the-scenes roles in shaping these unions. They whispered advice, shared warnings, and sometimes sabotaged plans they didn't agree with. A young woman might have been surrounded by subtle counsel, whether she wanted it or not. It takes a village to raise a Viking, and to marry one off, too. By the time your daughter finally speaks, her voice is steady. She says, "He seems kind." And you smile not because it's done, but because she's thinking like a Husfreyja already. You're standing in the doorway again just before sunrise. There's a stillness to the world mist curling low over the fields, the sea beyond the fjord, glittering faintly in the cold light. But your mind isn't on the weather, it's on the Brudkaup, the Viking wedding that's about to unfold. Because here's the thing, choosing a husband was only the beginning. The wedding itself was its own symphony of tradition, legal maneuvering, symbolic gestures, and let's be honest, copious amounts of food and drink. It wasn't just a celebration. It was a contract, a public commitment, where everyone from your great aunt to the village drunk got to weigh in. And you're the bride, the center of it all. Not a passive ornament, but an active participant in a moment that carried serious legal and social weight. First, let's talk location. While some weddings happened indoors, particularly in the winter, many took place outdoors in the presence of nature and the gods. Near a sacred grove on a hilltop, or beside a calm lake where offerings could be made. You might have worn a crown of woven herbs or iron to protect yourself from bad spirits. And yes, your outfit would be magnificent, handmade, richly dyed, covered in symbolic brooches and family heirlooms. You probably stitched part of it yourself, unless your mother insisted on doing it to calm her nerves. The groom, he'd already undergone a ritual of his own, the sword ceremony. In some regions, a man had to retrieve a sword from the grave of an ancestor, a symbolic act proving his lineage and strength. This sword would then be handed to you, the bride, as part of the ceremony. It wasn't just a nice gesture, it meant he trusted you with his legacy, his name, and if needed, his defense. In return, you gave him a dowry, or rather your family did. The dowry wasn't a bribe or a payment, it was an investment in the future household. Cloth, livestock, silver, perhaps even land. This dowry remained yours. Should you ever divorce, it came back with you. Historians still debate whether women could increase their dowry through their own enterprise, say weaving or trading. But most agree once married, a woman managed her portion of the household wealth independently. And let's not overlook the munder, a kind of bride price. This was paid by the groom's family to yours, but it didn't go to the father. It was meant for the bride herself, held in trust in case of widowhood. If your husband died, you weren't left with nothing, you had security, a cushion. Which is more than can be said for many medieval women who often found themselves tossed aside like a worn-out cloak once their husbands died. As the ceremony begins, you stand beside your chosen man, not behind him, not kneeling, but equal. The law speaker or elder officiating doesn't read vows from a book. Instead, they confirm that both parties are consenting, that both families approve, and that the gifts have been exchanged. The actual words vary from saga to saga, but the intent is clear. This is a bond, a partnership, and yes, a legal alliance. But here's the odd part. There might not be a kiss. Vikings weren't known for public displays of affection. You might clasp hands, exchange swords and rings. But kissing in front of elders, probably too forward. Save that for after the feast. And what a feast it is! Roasted meats, mead, and carved drinking horns. Songs that go on so long you forget where they started. Someone's uncle is likely to give a toast that becomes a monologue. A skald might compose a verse on the spot. Children run wild between the benches. Dogs steal bits of bread, and all the while you and your new husband remain at the high table, smiling through every course. Some brides were expected to give a speech. Nothing dramatic, just a few words about unity, gratitude, perhaps a sly joke about household chores. You'd thank your family his, and remind everyone of the sacred ties now formed between two houses. And speaking of sacred ties, let's talk about the wedding night. Calm down. We're keeping it PG-13. It was custom for the bride and groom to be led to their bed by a small procession, often including female relatives who carried candles, gifts, or even small torches to bless the room. Bedding ceremonies weren't about voyeurism. They were about ritual and transition. This was when you officially moved from daughter to wife, from one household to another. In some sagas, they placed symbolic items beneath the bed: a sword for protection, a loaf of bread for nourishment, a key for authority. These weren't just metaphors, they were statements. As wife, you'd oversee the home, the food stores, the relationships that kept the village ticking. And if you were nervous, well, there might be a lullaby sung from the other room or a warm drink slipped into your hands. The night wasn't about performance, it was about passage, a new beginning. One you stepped into with your eyes open, your name intact, and your rights protected. Of course, not all weddings were perfect. Some were rushed due to feuds or winter closing in. Others were lavish to the point of bankruptcy. One saga tells of a bride who vanished before the ceremony, only to reappear weeks later with a better offer. Her original groom publicly humiliated, but no one dared force her into the original match. That was her call. Remember, this Viking weddings were flexible, adaptable. Unlike rigid Christian unions of later centuries, Norse marriages could be shaped by the couple, the clan, and the moment. They were practical, yes, but they were also deeply personal. And once the feasting ends, the guests stumble home through the foggy night, laughing and singing badly. You remain by the hearth with your husband, the fire still glowing, the last crumbs of honey cake on the table. You made your choice. He made his. And tomorrow you'll start building something together, not because you had to, but because you both said yes. The sun is up now, though it barely skims the edge of the sky. Winter in the north doesn't give you much daylight, but that's fine. You're used to making the most of what's given. And this morning, it's not light. You're thinking about its logistics. Because once the feasting is done, once the horns of mead have been drained and the last wedding song has gone flat, something quieter but no less important begins the weaving of daily life. You're not just a bride now. You're the Husfreyja, the mistress of a Viking household. And believe it or not, that comes with real authority. Let's begin with the keys. No, not metaphorical keys, the actual keys. In many Viking households, a newly married woman was symbolically presented with a set of keys. They didn't go to a drawer or a cabinet. They hung on a ring at her waist, often beside her knife or spindle. These keys were status. They opened the storerooms, the locked chests, and in some cases, even the strong boxes where silver was kept. They were a signal to everyone: this woman runs the household now. And what a household it was! Viking homes weren't the isolated nuclear family units we often imagine. They were bustling, dynamic spaces that included extended kin, hired workers, foster children, enslaved laborers, and frequent guests. As the woman of the house, you'd be in charge of food storage, textiles, daily schedules, and sometimes even arbitration between squabbling members of the household. Think of it like being the CEO of a mid-sized company with goats. Your new husband might sail off on a raid or head inland to trade or vanish for weeks on a timber expedition. You stayed. You managed. You kept the fires lit, the milk curdled properly, and the roof from collapsing under snow. And while you're certainly not going out swinging swords, make no mistake, your role was not soft. Take, for example, the grit needed to keep linen production going through a cold snap, or the sheer strength required to haul water from a frozen stream, or the diplomacy necessary to keep peace between your mother-in-law and the family thrall. You wielded power, yes, but power laced with patience. And speaking of patience, children, if you were lucky or unlucky depending on how long the cradle kept you up, you'd start a family soon after marriage. Childbearing was dangerous, even fatal, but it was also deeply respected. Carved gravestones sometimes feature runes saying simply, "She was the mother of good sons." That was high praise. Still, it wasn't all about babies. Not every Viking woman became a mother. Some were foster parents. Others remained childless and instead invested their energy in trade textiles or religion. The key thing, you had options. You weren't boxed in. Let's drift for a moment into one of the lesser-known corners of Viking culture: female entrepreneurship. Yes, really. Some women, especially widows or elder matriarchs, ran trading ventures. They owned ships. They lent silver. One famous burial in Birka, Sweden, contains a woman buried with scales, weights, and keys, classic markers of a merchant's life. She likely controlled a business either alone or in tandem with male kin. And while historians still debate whether this was common or exceptional, the fact remains Viking women weren't strangers to commerce. Even in a more typical household, trade and barter were part of daily life. You might spin wool for sale, brew ale for the local feast, or trade dyed fabrics for spices brought up from the Frankish lands. Your weaving, if particularly fine, could fetch high value at market or earn your family a reputation that opened doors for better marriage alliances later. And here's a quirky tidbit: in some areas, Norse women brewed beer not just for fun, but as an offering to the gods. You could say that being good at fermentation was both a divine service and a business model. Of course not. Every day was trade and triumph. You dealt with illness, bad harvests, floods, fires, and yes, arguments. A key part of your role as Husfreyja was peacekeeping. You were expected to know when to offer a kind word and when to slam a wooden ladle down and demand silence. You were the center of the household wheel. If you cracked, the whole thing buckled. Now, did this role give you legal rights? Absolutely. You could sue. You could inherit property, especially if no brothers were around. You could initiate divorce. The sagas are peppered with women who show up at court not weeping, but arguing cases like seasoned lawyers. And while some laws skewed male, the Viking legal tradition allowed women, especially of certain status, to have voices. Still, historians argue whether this female power was overstated in the sagas which were written down centuries later. Were they romanticizing a freer past? Possibly. But even if only some Viking women had this influence, the cultural memory of it stuck. That alone says something. Let's return now to you standing in your newly organized storeroom. You glance at your keys, your baskets of dried herbs, your tallies scratched into bone tablets. Outside, a young boy yells about sheep escaping again, and inside, someone's burnt the morning porridge. You sigh because this is your life now. Not easy, not glamorous, but yours. You chose this husband, this household, and now you choose each day how to shape it. You wake up to the creak of the longhouse rafters' wooden beams, stretching and groaning like old bones in the morning chill. Smoke lingers faintly from the hearth fire, and you can hear someone outside breaking ice in the trough for the animals. The smell of wet wool, wood smoke, and last night's ashes fills the air. Welcome to your new reality, the rhythms of Viking married life. This section of your journey isn't just about who you married or what keys dangle from your belt. It's about how you live day to day within the structure of a Norse marriage. And spoiler alert, Viking marriages weren't exactly romanticized candlelit dinners and soulmates riding off into the fjord sunset. They were partnerships, messy, practical, full of negotiation, and strangely modern in their expectations. You and your husband are now a unit, not equal in every way, but certainly more balanced than many other medieval cultures. Division of labor. That's the secret sauce. While he might head to the fields or the forge or even to sea, your domain, the household, isn't just women's work. It's economic backbone, survival strategy, and political leverage all rolled into one. You might start your morning checking on the dairy supplies. The cows have calved recently, and the milk must be churned into butter before it spoils. Viking butter, by the way, wasn't always yellow and creamy. Sometimes it was buried in bogs to ferment into a stronger, longer-lasting paste. Historians still argue whether this was a gourmet treat or just a way to avoid starvation. Either way, you're in charge of deciding when to dig it up. Meanwhile, your husband returns from a short fishing trip cod, mostly plus a suspiciously large eel he swears he didn't catch near the god's sacred pond. You trade him a look. You both know he did. Over midday stew, you divide the work for the week. He'll check on the fence near the sheep pen. You'll send one of the thralls to barter for dye at the next village. Then maybe you'll both attend a neighbor's feast on Thor's Day. It's not always this harmonious. Some days he sulks over trivial slights. Other days you're so busy spinning flax and refereeing livestock disputes that you don't speak until sunset. But here's the key difference: you can speak. You can negotiate. Viking wives weren't meant to be meek shadows. In fact, some women in the sagas are terrifyingly effective negotiators. Take Un the deep-minded. After her husband and son died, she built ships, sailed to Iceland, claimed land, and distributed it to her followers like a boss. She even hosted a banquet before she died just to make sure everyone knew their place. Was she typical? Maybe not. But was she admired? Absolutely. And remember those laws. They didn't just let you choose your husband, they gave you mechanisms to change your mind. Viking divorce was legal, surprisingly straightforward, and available to women under several conditions. If your husband mistreated you, failed to provide, or get this war feminine clothing, you could march outside, announce your intent to divorce in front of witnesses, and be free. No drawn-out litigation. No begging a bishop. Just 3 witnesses and your voice. Boom! Single. Granted, you probably wouldn't do it lightly. Divorce came with risks. It could divide alliances, split property, and trigger feuds. But it also meant you weren't trapped. You had a door you could walk through. And should you remarry? That was your call. Widows especially were considered highly desirable marriage prospects, wise, experienced, and usually in possession of solid property. There's a story in one saga about a man who proposes to a widow at her first husband's funeral feast. Romantic number, efficient, extremely. Back in your longhouse, your own marriage continues in its ebb and flow. Maybe he's annoyed you today, forgot the wool shipment again, or tracked mud into the weaving room. But maybe he also brought home a fine comb carved with runes, or remembered how you like your stew, thick, not watery. There's a rhythm to it like rowing, push-pull, give-take, and within that rhythm, affection can grow. Not the grand, poetic kind, but the practical affection of people who face the world together day after day. You both know what it means to weather storms, literal and emotional. Now let's pivot to something a little more unexpected. Did you know that married Viking couples occasionally made joint offerings to the gods for fertility, luck, or good weather? You and your husband might walk together to a local shrine carrying gifts of grain or animal fat. You might chant old verses or pour ale on a sacred stone. These rituals weren't just spiritual, they were team-building exercises. Holy, yes, but also deeply human. And yes, there were disagreements, sometimes serious ones. The sagas describe couples who fought over land rights, revenge obligations, or whether to join a sea voyage. One particularly spicy tale includes a wife who threatens to leave unless her husband avenges her brother's death. She wins the argument with a smirk. So yes, Viking marriages could be dramatic, but they weren't dictated entirely by male whims. You had a say, you had leverage, and that made all the difference. As evening falls in your longhouse, you tuck in the younger ones and stir the embers in the hearth. Your husband sits nearby, carving something from bone. He glances up, and for a moment the firelight catches a smile you hadn't seen all day. Not perfect, this life, but not bad either. You chose it. You're living it. And in the quiet glow of the fire, it feels, oddly enough, like power. The snow is falling again, soft, slow flakes, spiraling down like sleepy thoughts. Outside, the world is muffled, blanketed in a hush that only winter can bring. Inside your longhouse, everything is still but not idle. This is the season of stories, quiet labor, and long contemplative evenings. And for you, the newlywed Viking woman with keys jingling at your waist and butter churning in your pails, it's also the season of something far less romantic, managing in-laws. Yes, your marriage may have come with a dowry and legal rights, but it almost certainly came with a package deal his family, particularly his mother. Let's not sugarcoat it. Viking mothers-in-law were formidable. Many ran their households with iron ladles and expectations sharpened by decades. Now that you've stepped into the role of Husfreyja, she may be watching to see if you boil your fish long enough, if your loom tension is right, if you tuck your hair under your cap like a decent woman. Historians still argue whether the mother-in-law dynamic in Norse homes leaned more toward mentorship or mild emotional warfare. The sagas give us both. In one tale, a mother-in-law blesses her daughter-in-law's weaving so beautifully that the gods smile on the family. In another, a woman curses her daughter-in-law by poisoning her soup with hallucinogenic herbs. That escalated quickly. You walk the middle road. You listen more than you speak. You ask for advice, then quietly do things your way. Slowly through shared chores and exchanged smirks at your husband's obliviousness, a fragile alliance starts to form. She's not your enemy. She just wants to know if her son is in good hands. But she's not the only relative in your new orbit. There are sisters, cousins, possibly brothers of your husband who haven't yet moved out. Viking longhouses could be crowded, and extended families often live together, especially in winter. Privacy, a luxury. You sleep with a curtain if you're lucky, and gossip is as thick in the air as wood smoke. So you adapt. You learn which uncle snores, which cousin sneaks extra honey from the pantry, and which niece repeats everything she hears, so you definitely don't grumble within her earshot. You also figure out who your allies are. One sister-in-law has a sense of humor. She becomes your co-conspirator when things get tense. Together you joke about the time the goat walked across the roof or the time your husband lost a fishing bet and had to wear his cloak backwards for a week. Humor, after all, is a survival tool, and so is storytelling. Long nights in Norse culture weren't just for rest, they were for sagas, songs, and tall tales. You join in. At first you listen, then, as your confidence grows, you tell your own stories. Perhaps you recount how you and your sister once pretended to be Norns and foretold who would marry the pig herder, poor Inga. Maybe you share a spooky tale passed down from your grandmother involving frost spirits and missing mittens. Your voice becomes a thread in the household tapestry. And as you stitch your place into this family, you notice something subtle but important. Your marriage is not just about the two of you anymore. It's a bridge between kin groups, a bond between farms, a quiet political alliance woven into meals shared labor, and winter games played by firelight. Did you know that Norse board games like Hnefatafl were considered excellent mental training? You and your husband sometimes play together. He's good, but you're better. He grumbles. You smirk. And your mother-in-law pretends not to smile. Even the children watch, absorbing how a marriage looks, not as a fairy tale, but as a practical, functioning relationship. They see you argue over firewood and then laugh about it later. They hear you sing while you work. They learn perhaps without realizing what a strong Viking woman sounds like. And through it all, the seasons turn. You go from your first winter as wife to your first spring. Calves are born. Snow melts into thick, sticky mud. Everything needs fixing: roofs, fences, tempers. You plant herbs, air out, wool chase goats. You also host your first feast. It's not perfect. Someone overcooks the fish and your husband forgets to greet the guest of honor first, but everyone leaves full and smiling. Your mother-in-law mutters something about how not bad it was. That's a rave review, by the way. By midsummer, you've started to feel something you didn't expect: ownership. Not just of tasks or chores, but of space. The longhouse feels different now. Yours. The pantry smells like your spices. The loom sings with your rhythms. Even your husband's laugh has become familiar, in the best way, a warm, reliable punctuation to the day. It's not passion like the skalds sing about. It's not easy, but it's real. And the more you settle into your role, the more you understand the beauty of it. Viking marriage wasn't static. It grew, evolved, stretched to fit the seasons and the needs of the household. And as the snow returns next winter, and you pass by the fire where you first hesitated to speak, you realize you haven't just joined a family. You've become its axis. You've learned when to speak and when to hold your tongue, when to argue and when to brew extra mead. You've learned that being a Viking wife isn't about being quiet or small. It's about being steady. Not loud, but heard. Not soft, but strong. And when your husband, mud on his boots, soot on his cheek, walks in one night, kisses your forehead, and hands you a crooked little carved pendant he made himself, you don't swoon. You smile, roll your eyes, and tell him it's ugly. Then you hang it over your bed anyway. Because here, in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by snow and stories and in-laws, you've built something real, and that's worth more than any dowry. The sun is setting earlier now, casting its golden-orange glow across the frozen fjord. The days grow shorter, the wind sharper, and inside your longhouse, the quiet rhythm of winter life begins to settle in. The work is familiar now, as are the faces you see each morning. This is no longer a time of novelty and adjustment. You know the roles, the expectations, and even the hidden subtexts of every glance across the room. But as comfortable as the rhythm has become, there's still the looming reality of Viking social life, especially the intricacies of alliances and feasts. This is when the political side of your marriage becomes apparent. Viking marriages weren't just personal, they were crucial to the stability of clans, the securing of resources, and the navigating of the intricate web of local politics. As a Viking wife, your role extends beyond the longhouse, weaving into the broader social fabric of your people. And just like your husband's boat has to be carefully maintained and properly manned, so too must your alliances. Your household, your marriage. These are the currency in the marketplace of Viking society. One of the most important ways this plays out. Feasts. You might be thinking of mead-roasted meat and friendly rivalry over dice games, and yes, that's part of it. But feasts were more than just the social event of the season. They were a crucial mechanism for strengthening bonds between clans, forging alliances, and showing off your wealth and prowess. As the wife of a Viking warrior, you're often tasked with preparing these gatherings. And while you may not be wielding a sword in battle, you're wielding something just as powerful: your hospitality. You've probably already helped with the meat preparation, cutting, and curing the boar and deer your husband and his men hunted during the summer. The smell of roasting meats fills the longhouse as you and your neighbors gather hands, moving in a blur of careful choreography. But it's not just about feeding people. It's about signaling your household's strength. The feasts themselves can get rather interesting. You learn quickly how to navigate the dance of toasts and compliments, how to make small talk with the best warriors, and keep a straight face while your cousin-in-law's bad jokes get progressively worse. But there's also an art to it, the art of maintaining your status. Your husband might sit with the warriors, but you'll be busy making sure that his place is well placed within the political fabric of the room. Who's sitting where? Which families are speaking? What alliances are being forged under the cover of ale? You'll be at the edges, quiet, but watching your mind, calculating the undercurrents of each conversation. You never know where your next alliance might come from. It might be a simple conversation about farming techniques that blossoms into a trade agreement for wool, or it might be a secret agreement to raid a neighboring settlement for plunder. Whatever the case, your marriage is more than personal, it's strategically crucial. At these feasts, you may also encounter the skalds, the poets who immortalize the deeds of warriors in verse. The skalds are like roving historians, and their stories can make or break reputations. Sometimes these tales are told about your own family tales of heroic deeds, epic journeys, or well-fought battles. Other times, they are stories about the gods, about how Thor swung his hammer to protect the gods, or how Loki's tricks got everyone in trouble. You and your husband listen intently, nodding along, but in the back of your mind, you're thinking about what your family story will be. The feasts themselves aren't just about food and drink. They're arenas. They're places where you, as a Viking wife, can make a name for yourself, not as a warrior perhaps, but as someone capable of managing the social intricacies of clan life. You can offer advice, share in the jokes, manage the servants, and more than anything, keep the peace. Your role isn't just domestic, it's diplomatic. But let's not forget the less glamorous side of these feasts. Your husband is often called away on raids or to represent your clan in other villages. He may be away for weeks, sometimes months, and it's up to you to hold the fort down in his absence. And while he's out there battling to bring home wealth, you're busy battling winter storms, herding the animals, maintaining your homestead, and of course, keeping an eye on the household's ongoing social standing. His absence might leave a gap in your emotional life, but in terms of the daily operation of the household, it's business as usual. Viking women weren't entirely dependent on their husband's presence. They were capable of running the house, making decisions, and even protecting the land in their husband's absence. You might oversee a few negotiations with merchants, or perhaps you find yourself leading a group of men and women in defending your home from a sudden raid. These were rare occasions, certainly, but they happened. And through it all, you maintain the social connections. You're still attending feasts, still exchanging favors, still consolidating your household's position. This quiet power, subtle but undeniably effective, is what makes Viking marriages so unique. You're not just a woman waiting at home for your husband to return from battle. You're an active participant in the world around you, working behind the scenes to maintain your family's strength. As the seasons change, you find yourself becoming more adept at managing the household, attending feasts, and strengthening your clan's position. Your marriage, once a new chapter in your life, has now become a central pillar of who you are in the Viking world. Your role isn't just wife or mother, it's matriarch, negotiator, and protector, all rolled into one. You're not a passive bystander in your marriage. You're as active as your husband, perhaps even more so. And as the next feast approaches, and your husband heads off to deal with his warriors and allies, you'll remain behind managing the day-to-day, securing alliances and making sure your family remains strong. Because in the Viking world, strength isn't just measured in battles fought on the shores. It's measured in the subtle, constant work that keeps everything running. The scent of autumn fills the air as the crisp wind sweeps through the open door of your longhouse. The trees are shedding their leaves, the earth is growing harder, and your thoughts, like the harvest, turn toward the future. The coming winter will be long, and with it, a new set of challenges. Your family's survival isn't just about having enough food for the season. It's about keeping the land, the people, and the alliances strong. Every action you take now has consequences later, and your mind moves with a quiet purpose, planning for what's to come. It's at this time of year that the Viking wife often found herself at a crossroads between seasons. The harvest must be preserved. Wool needs to be spun. The animals need their shelter. But it's also the time when the social calendar seems to fill up with increasingly important events. While your husband prepares for the inevitable battles and voyages of the coming year, you are busy preparing for something just as essential: your role in the Althing. The Althing, or what might be called the Viking Assembly, was the very heart of Norse society. It was here that laws were debated, disputes settled, and marriages arranged. It was, in short, where power flowed and destinies were shaped. In most cultures of the time, women had no direct say in these political matters. But the Norse were different, and Viking women often had influence, if not direct authority. In particular, the Althing was the place where you, as a wife, could speak up. It was where the woman could negotiate, claim her rights, and even call out an injustice. But such occasions didn't come without their own risks. The stakes were high. A single word spoken in anger or fear could have consequences, not just for you, but for your entire clan. It's not uncommon for Viking wives to play political games at these events, or at least act as their husband's silent partners. Your husband may lead the charge in battle, but you're often the strategist behind the scenes, navigating the alliances and settling the scores. You've seen the way other wives conduct themselves at these assemblies: carefully timed smiles, sharp eyes, watching everything, ready to step in when necessary. As the Althing approaches, you can feel the energy change. The men become more focused, sharpening their weapons, preparing their legal arguments, or simply bracing themselves for a long journey. And then there's you, quietly preparing your own strategy. Whether it's overseeing the preparation of the land for planting come spring, ensuring that resources are stored for the winter, or quietly counseling your husband on a matter he hasn't yet seen the full picture of. Your role is a quiet one, yet every bit as important. You're not leading the charge, but you're directing the troops. You manage the home front while your husband is away. And when he returns, you'll sit with him and share your thoughts, helping him form his own decisions. Perhaps you'll remind him that old alliances need renewing, or that this year's harvest was more abundant than expected, and the clan can afford a little generosity. It's not all politics, of course. There are the simple pleasures of life. After a long day of work, there are still moments of joy, like sitting beside the fire, your children nestled at your feet, and listening to the crackling logs as you share the small victories of the day. You remember your early days, your nervousness at the start of your marriage, and smile softly to yourself. What once seemed so daunting is now just another part of life. But your role as a Viking wife, especially in the context of the Althing, also brings a sense of responsibility. In many ways, you're more involved in shaping the course of events than anyone realizes. After all, while your husband might have the final say in public matters, it's you who helps him see the nuances, who strengthens him when the weight of leadership becomes too much. As the winter months begin to settle in and the snow starts to blanket the land, you turn inward, both physically and mentally. You think about your growing family, your home, and your place in the world. Your marriage may have started as an arrangement between two families, but it has grown into something stronger, something more profound. What began as a partnership between two people is now a collaboration between two worlds, the hearth and the battlefield, the home and the wider political arena. It's here in the stillness of winter that you realize just how far you've come. You are no longer a new bride unsure of her place. You are now a wife, a mother, and a respected member of your community. And as you sit by the fire watching the flames dance, you realize that you've carved out your own legacy, one that's strong, quiet, and lasting. This realization doesn't bring a loud triumph or any fanfare. Instead, it's a soft sense of peace that fills you. In the quiet of winter, with the wind howling outside, you can rest assured, knowing that you have played your part. And in the world of Vikings, where everything seems to be dictated by strength and conflict, your quiet strength and unwavering resolve have proven to be just as valuable. The stillness of winter is broken only by the occasional howl of the wind as it slips through cracks in the longhouse. Inside the crackle of the fire is your only companion, casting warm, dancing shadows across the room. The chill outside seems to amplify the warmth within, making the hearth feel like the heart of the world. Yet while this peace might seem tranquil, there's a weight in the air, a quiet tension that comes with the seasons of a Viking wife. This time of year, when the long ships are docked and the fields lie fallow beneath layers of snow, the Viking warrior's attention turns inward. Gone are the days of constant raids and exploration. Now is the time for reflection, for mending armor, and for planning the future. But this also means your husband, though physically present, is in a different kind of state. His mind is filled with thoughts of the past year's battles and the decisions yet to be made for the coming spring. As his wife, you are called upon to be his confidant. The moment when he seeks your counsel has arrived. Though Viking women rarely wield a sword on the battlefield, they wield power in different ways, and this quiet power, the power to influence, to shape ideas and plans, often rests in your hands. These moments in winter, when you're both at home together, are your opportunities to make your mark, to help your husband see things from a different perspective. Your role isn't always as clear-cut as you might hope, though. The Viking way of life demands a woman's loyalty and patience. Your husband is, after all, a warrior, a man of action. But there are times when even warriors must sit and think, when even the boldest of hearts needs a steady hand beside them to guide the way. This, too, is your role in the Viking marriage. You aren't simply holding the fort down. You're helping to steer the ship when it seems adrift. And as much as Viking men are known for their battle prowess, it's the quiet resilience of their wives that often keeps the ship from sinking when the storms of life come. You understand this now, perhaps more than you did in those first years of marriage when you were still finding your way. As the days stretch on and winter becomes a long, shadowy lull, you find yourself mulling over the complexities of Viking society. Life might seem to slow down during these months of cold, But it's in these quiet moments of solitude where you begin to understand just how deeply intertwined you are in the broader web of Viking life. It's not just about being a warrior's wife. It's about being the strategist, the planner, the calm amidst the storm. There are many more layers to the Viking way of life than you could have anticipated. Sure, you knew that your role in battle was non-traditional, that you'd never raise a sword in the heat of the fray. But there's another battle, one of social maneuvering, one of alliances and agreements. In some ways, the political machinations of the Viking world are as crucial as the actual fighting. And while you may not have been prepared for the intricacies of navigating these complex relationships, you now find yourself at ease with it. You have learned over time that your position is not one to be underestimated. You are not just your husband's support. You are in your own right a formidable force. Whether you are negotiating the future of your land with other clans, or making a quiet but impactful decision about the direction your family should take, you know that your word carries weight. You've seen it at the Althing, where women like you have been known to speak their minds, offering advice or making a plea for justice. But in these quieter months, it's your husband you focus on offering advice, listening intently as he speaks of his own doubts and guiding him through the maze of decisions that lie ahead. His confidence in you, once a quiet understanding, is now a deep, unwavering trust. There is no divide between you. You are partners in this marriage, and your bond has only deepened over time. In a world where much of Viking society seems to be shaped by war, blood, and violence, you have carved out a different kind of influence, a quieter, subtler power that carries just as much weight as the clash of swords. The Vikings may be known for their fierce warriors, but the women who stand behind those warriors are the ones who ensure their legacy endures. And so as the winds howl outside and the nights grow longer, you reflect on all that is past and all that is yet to come. You have weathered battles, faced hardships, and stood by your husband through it all. And in this moment, surrounded by the warmth of the fire, you realize something profound. Your power, your influence, your legacy is not just in the wars fought or the riches plundered. It's in the way you've shaped your family's future, in the way you've built a home that stands firm against the storms of life. In a world that often overlooked the quiet strength of women, you have found a way to stand tall, just as strong and as vital as any warrior. Winter's grip on the land tightens and the snow falls in endless silent sheets, covering everything in its path. The longhouse feels smaller now, cozier, and yet a part of you feels restless. The days are long and quiet, yet beneath the calm surface the anticipation of the spring's arrival lingers. It's not just the promise of better weather or the return of the sun you look forward to, it's the new beginnings that come with it. For a Viking wife, every season brings the opportunity to reassess, to renew, and perhaps even to strengthen the bonds of family and clan. Your husband's voyages may seem far away, but the time for those adventures always seems to come rushing back. He is constantly planning, even during these quiet months, preparing for the challenges ahead. But you too are planning, even if the landscape looks so still outside. It's in these long nights that you map out your next moves, your future. Perhaps you'll need more cattle in the spring, or maybe an alliance with a neighboring clan could be worth exploring. It's the quiet undercurrent of your life, a constant shift, a careful balancing act between nurturing your home and participating in the larger world. There is one particular moment you reflect on often during these months, the moment when you first realized how much power you held. It wasn't something that came to you in a flash of insight, but rather something that grew slowly over time. As a young woman, you might have looked up at the women in your village, wondering how they managed to navigate the world so gracefully, so effortlessly. But now, years later, you realize it wasn't grace at all. It was strength. Quiet, unyielding strength. You've seen firsthand how Viking women are not to be underestimated. Though much of the world may have been dominated by men with swords, the women who ran the households, raised the children, and managed the daily affairs were just as integral to Viking society as the warriors who sailed to far-off lands. While the men fought and raided, you and others like you held the fort, ensuring that the foundation of the clan remained firm. You made decisions, influenced outcomes, and made sure that the land your people relied on was protected even in your husband's absence. And it's not just about running the household. Your influence stretches further than the hearth. You understand the alliances, the shifts in power, the subtle political movements that others might overlook. While your husband's focus may be on the next battle or journey, your focus is on the future of your family, your people, and your legacy. The home may be the epicenter of the Viking family, but you as its keeper are the one who ensures its survival. Of course, life as a Viking wife has its challenges. The very nature of Viking life means that you must always be prepared for the worst. Whether it's an unexpected raid or the sudden illness of a family member, there is always something that can disrupt the peace. But as much as Viking life is unpredictable, you've learned to thrive within that uncertainty. You've learned to find strength not in the things you can control, but in the way you respond to what you cannot. Perhaps this is why your connection to the land is so strong. You are intimately familiar with the rhythms of nature, the seasons, the harvests, the winds, and how they all intertwine with the rhythms of life itself. You understand that every season has its purpose, just as every phase of life has its lessons. The long winter nights may seem endless, but they are also the time for reflection, for planning, and for preparing for the growth that will come in the spring. And even as you prepare for the coming months, you remain grounded in the present. You still find joy in the small things, in the quiet moments with your family, and in the sense of peace that comes with knowing you've done all you can to prepare. The fire crackles softly in the hearth, and you settle deeper into your furs, feeling the weight of your role in the world. You are, after all, a woman of the Viking age, resilient, steadfast, and indispensable. As spring approaches, there's a renewed sense of purpose in the air. The ground will thaw, the animals will stir from their slumber, and life will return to the land. And with that, a new chapter will begin. You will face new challenges, but you will meet them with the same quiet strength that has carried you through so many seasons before. Your husband may be the warrior who sails the seas, but you are the woman who keeps the world turning at home. The bonds of your marriage are built on this mutual respect, his courage on the battlefield, and your wisdom at home. Your influence extends far beyond the walls of your longhouse, as you've become a vital part of the network of alliances and relationships that make Viking society strong. Your role as a Viking wife is not just to support your husband, but to actively shape the course of your family's future, even as the world around you shifts. As the snow begins to melt and the first signs of spring poke through the frozen earth, you sense that change is coming. It's not just the season that will shift, but the way your life continues to unfold. And as you look ahead to the challenges and triumphs that await you, can rest assured that you will face them not just as a wife, but as a force in your own right. The quiet strength you've cultivated over the years has given you more power than you may have ever imagined. And in the world of Vikings, that power is something to be reckoned with. The winds are shifting and you can feel it in the air. The sun, though weak, is starting to push through the clouds a little more each day. The snow is beginning to melt, revealing patches of earth that have lain dormant beneath the frost for what seems like forever. As the first signs of spring break through the long winter, you find yourself reflecting once again on the extraordinary role of Viking women and the quiet, powerful influence they hold in the culture. The Viking Age may be synonymous with raiders and warriors, with brutal battles and long journeys across distant lands, but your role as a Viking wife is just as critical to the survival of the clan. You are not just a caretaker or a homemaker. You are a cornerstone of the family, a figure who helps define what it means to belong to a Viking household. It is a role that may be understated, but it is one of profound influence. Your influence grows during the colder months, but as spring draws near, the air becomes thick with anticipation. The men are gearing up for their voyages, preparing their longships, and sharpening their axes. Your husband is among them, his thoughts focused on the battles to come. But before he sets out once again, there's a quiet understanding between you. You two are preparing for the future, and your partnership is grounded in a deep trust, his strength in battle, and your strength in keeping everything running smoothly at home. One of the greatest things you have come to understand is the necessity of balance. Your world is one of contrasts of quiet domesticity and roaring battles of peaceful family life and the harsh, unpredictable realities of Viking society. As the warrior prepares for the journey, so do you prepare for what awaits in his absence. Whether it's securing provisions for the long months ahead or tending to the animals, your responsibilities are many, and they don't end when the ship sails away. In these moments, you rely on the skills you've cultivated throughout the years. The practicality of your day-to-day life becomes clear when you face the logistical challenges of managing everything in your husband's absence. You find yourself in charge of the land, deciding which crops to plant, ensuring the cattle are well cared for, and overseeing the work of those who help manage the homestead. It is your calm, calculated approach that ensures everything remains in order, even when the world outside feels like it is spinning out of control. You've come to recognize the immense respect your role demands. It's easy to imagine the Viking warrior as the hero, the one who sets sail and returns with riches and glory. But you've learned that glory doesn't always come from the battlefields. Sometimes it comes from the quiet work done at home in the shadows of the hearth. Your world is not one of public recognition, but of private triumphs, the kind that hold families together through generations, the kind that define the very fabric of Viking life. As your husband makes his preparations, there's an unspoken understanding between you. You don't need to remind him of your partnership. He knows that he leaves behind a family that can weather the storm without him. And as you move through the rituals of preparing for his absence, you find a sense of peace in your own strength. It's not that you're immune to the fear or the uncertainty that comes with sending your husband off to war once again. But there's a quiet confidence in the knowledge that you are more than capable of handling the challenges that lie ahead. In fact, in some ways his departure only solidifies your sense of purpose. With him gone, you are free to focus entirely on the future, the growth of the family, the health of the livestock, and the security of the home. You become the cornerstone of the family's survival, guiding it with a steady hand as the seasons shift and change. It is a responsibility that may not come with the prestige of the warrior's role, but it is a responsibility that is no less important. You are the one who ensures that the legacy of the family lives on, and that it continues to thrive in even the most challenging of circumstances. As the days grow longer and the warmth of spring begins to spread across the land, you prepare to embrace the new season, knowing that your influence is far-reaching. You are the architect of your family's future, the keeper of its traditions, and the quiet strength that holds everything together. The world may look to the warriors for their feats of bravery, but you know that true strength lies in the everyday perseverance of those who work in the background, ensuring that the world continues to turn. The Viking society, though famous for its warriors and conquests, is just as dependent on the women who keep it running. From tending the hearth to managing the homestead and the land, your work is an essential part of the larger machinery of Viking life. It is a role you have come to embrace with pride, knowing that without women like you, the Viking way of life would never have endured. As spring blooms in full force and the first crops begin to sprout from the soil, you can't help but feel a sense of pride in what you've built. The future is uncertain, as it always is, but you are prepared for whatever comes next. With each passing season, you've learned that it's not the battles you fight on the front lines that define you, but the quiet battles fought in the heart of the home. And as you look ahead to the challenges of the coming months, you face them with the confidence that you will overcome whatever comes your way. The world outside feels alive now, the icy grip of winter loosening as the earth begins to wake from its long slumber. The sun lingers longer in the sky, casting a soft golden hue across the land. It's the beginning of a new chapter, not just for nature, but for you and your family as well. There's a sense of possibility in the air, a quiet excitement as the days grow warmer, and you find yourself reflecting once more on the vital role Viking women play in the cycle of life, both literally and metaphorically. The world of Viking women is not simply a backdrop to the warriors' tales, it is the foundation upon which everything else is built. It's the strength of women like you that ensures the survival of the family, the home, and the community. Without you, the Viking way of life would not have thrived the way it did, and you know it. You may not wield a sword like your husband or brother, but you wield something just as powerful, the ability to shape the future. Spring is a season of renewal, and this renewal is not just external, it's internal too. For a Viking wife, this is the time of year to reassess your goals, to plan for what comes next, and to take stock of the strength that resides within you. With the promise of longer, warmer days ahead, you think about the future of your family and your clan. You begin to make preparations for what lies ahead, from the planting of crops to the making of new alliances. The work never stops, but neither does the potential for growth. As you move through the daily rhythms of the season, tending to the animals, preparing food, and overseeing the workings of the household, you are keenly aware that your role is far more complex than it might appear. You are in many ways the backbone of the Viking community. While your husband embarks on new adventures, you are the one holding everything together at home, managing the day-to-day affairs that make the clan function. It's easy to overlook the work that happens in the background, but you know that without you, everything would fall apart. Viking women often found themselves at the forefront of important decisions, even in the absence of their husbands. This wasn't just a matter of necessity, it was a reflection of the respect they commanded within their communities. You are expected to make decisions that impact not only your family, but the wider clan. Whether it's overseeing the distribution of food during lean times or deciding who to marry your daughter, to your influence stretches far beyond the walls of your home. You've come to understand that your life, though centered on the home, is intricately tied to the larger world. Your decisions don't happen in a vacuum. They have far-reaching consequences, and you are keenly aware of that fact. Every decision you make, from the crops you plant to the relationships you nurture, affects not just the immediate family, but the future of the clan. And there are moments, too, when you find yourself thinking about the future of your daughters. What kind of women will they grow into? What kind of Viking wives will they be? The question lingers in the back of your mind as you teach them the ways of the household, as you show them how to make decisions, how to navigate the delicate balance between nurturing and leading. You are preparing them for the future, not just in terms of practical skills, but in the understanding that their role is just as essential as any warrior's. It's in these moments, as you pass down knowledge from one generation to the next, that you realize the true power of your position. You are not merely a caretaker. You are a teacher, a leader, and a protector of the legacy. The strength you pass on to your daughters will shape their lives and, in turn, the future of Viking society. There is power in this quiet work, in the everyday acts of teaching, nurturing, and guiding. And yet, despite the weight of responsibility that rests on your shoulders, there is a part of you that finds joy in the work. You feel a sense of satisfaction as the days stretch longer and the crops begin to grow. You see the fruits of your labor not just in the physical work of the land, but in the strength of the relationships you nurture and the future you're helping to build. As you continue to manage the household, you realize that in many ways, the cycle of life is a reflection of the seasons themselves. Just as winter gives way to spring and spring to summer, so too does your role evolve with time. You have learned to adapt to flow with the changing tides of life and to meet each new challenge with a steady hand. The work never ends, but neither does the satisfaction that comes with it. There is no glory in your work, no grand battle to be fought or victory to be won. But in the quiet behind-the-scenes work that defines your life, you understand that the true strength of Viking society lies not in the warriors' swords, but in the women who ensure the survival of their world. As the earth awakens and life begins anew, you know that you will face whatever comes next with the same quiet strength that has always guided you. The path may be uncertain, but you are ready. You've always been ready. For a Viking wife, the real battle is not fought on the battlefield, but in the home where every decision, every moment, and every act of love and leadership shapes the future. The air is filled with the sounds of birds returning from their migration, and the unmistakable scent of earth and growing things fills the breeze. The sun's warmth is now undeniable, bathing everything in a soft glow. The busy spring days have begun, and you're once again fully immersed in the rhythms of your work. But now there is a palpable shift in the way you see it all. As a Viking woman, you are part of something greater than yourself, a tapestry woven together by the needs of your family, your clan, and the wider Viking world. Your life is one of intricate interdependence. You rely on your community just as much as they rely on you. While the warriors venture out into foreign lands, you and the other women carry the weight of life at home. You are often the glue that holds everything together, and you've come to understand that this work, though invisible to many, is the true lifeblood of Viking society. The community's dependency on you is perhaps most evident during this time of year. While the men are away fighting or trading, it is you who must ensure that all the pieces fall into place. From farming to managing trade goods to caring for the children and elderly, your day is a blur of activity. But despite the overwhelming nature of it all, you've come to find solace in the steady nature of these tasks. There's something comforting in the predictability of your duties, in the certainty that with each passing day, you are contributing to the future of your people. In many ways, the challenges you face as a Viking wife mirror those of the warriors. Both of you are engaged in a form of battle. Yours is just fought on different terms. The warriors face the physical challenges of combat and exploration, while you face the mental and emotional challenges of managing the home and family. There's no glory in it, no tales sung about your perseverance, but it's no less important. Without your steady leadership, the warriors would return to nothing. One of the aspects of this work that perhaps most surprises outsiders is how much responsibility rests in your hands. While Viking men went off to war, often returning with new riches or stories of their exploits, you stayed behind to manage the land, the cattle, the children, and everything in between. You had the power to decide who would marry whom, what crops would be planted, and even when the right moment was to celebrate a new season or honor the gods. Your decisions were not made in isolation. They were shaped by years of tradition and community knowledge, and they were always focused on securing the future of your family. But as much as you respect these responsibilities, you also understand the importance of flexibility. Life in the Viking world is uncertain. One year's crop might flourish, while the next might fail. The seasonal changes are constant, but the elements are unpredictable. This requires you to be nimble, to think ahead, and to make adjustments on the fly. No matter how much you prepare, there is always an element of risk, whether it's the threat of raiders, a failed harvest, or simply the harsh realities of Viking life. Despite the challenges, you found a sense of pride in this constant juggling act. The world may see you as simply the wife or the homemaker, but you know better. You are an integral part of the Viking way of life. You hold the fabric of your community together. Without you, the warriors would return to barren lands, to broken homes, and to an uncertain future. With you, they return to a place of stability, a place where life can continue to grow, no matter what the future may bring. One thing that helps you manage these demanding responsibilities is the tight-knit community of women you've built around you. You aren't alone in your efforts. Other Viking wives and mothers, sisters and daughters work alongside you, creating a network of support. There's an unspoken understanding between you and these women. You all rely on one another, whether it's for help in the fields, guidance on family matters, or simply emotional support during difficult times. You share stories, give advice, and help one another when the load feels too heavy to bear. This network is essential, especially when it comes to making decisions about your children's futures. Raising a child in Viking society is no small task. From a very young age, children are taught the value of hard work, independence, and resilience. But they also need guidance and support, and as their mother, you are the one who provides that in abundance. Your role as a mother is perhaps the most profound of all. You are not just raising children, you are shaping the future of the Viking people. You think about your daughter and what kind of woman she will grow to be. What kind of Viking wife, mother, or warrior will she become? You've already taught her much how to weave, how to care for animals, how to make the decisions that will shape her future. But you also know that she will learn much from the women around her, her aunt, the other wives, and even the elder women in the community who have passed down their wisdom through generations. It's a shared legacy, one that you hope she will carry forward just as you have done. As the days get warmer and the crops begin to thrive, there's a sense of satisfaction in knowing that you are building something lasting. You're not just surviving, you're building a foundation for the next generation. Your work, though often invisible to outsiders, is no less important than the battles fought by the men. It's the work that ensures the survival of the clan, the future of the people, and the continuation of a way of life that has endured for centuries. In these quiet moments as the sun sets and the fire flickers softly in the hearth, you take a deep breath and reflect on the role you play. The world may never sing songs about your quiet courage, but you know that your contribution is invaluable. Without you, the Viking world would crumble, but with you, it will continue to thrive. The seasons will come and go, the warriors will return and leave, and the challenges will continue. But through it all, you will remain steadfast, the quiet heart of the Viking world, guiding your family and your community into a new day. The future is uncertain, but you are ready. The cool evening air wraps itself around you like a soft blanket, and the quiet hum of the evening settles in. The sun has dipped behind the horizon, and the sky above is painted in hues of pink-orange and soft purple. The warmth from the day lingers in the earth beneath your feet, and there's a sense of calm that accompanies this time of day. A moment to reflect, to breathe, and to appreciate the quiet work that fills your life. In this moment of peace, you think back to all the ways Viking women have shaped history, to the countless women who have come before you and carved out their own path in this world. You too are part of that lineage, part of a history that is often overlooked but is no less important. In the Viking world, women like you were not merely supporters of the warriors. You were leaders in your own right, making decisions, leading the household, and shaping the future. You can't help but marvel at the ways Viking society was structured. As a woman, you had a unique freedom and autonomy that was rare for women in many other cultures. While men ventured into battle, raided foreign shores, or traded goods far and wide, you were at the heart of the home, managing the everyday complexities of life. You were a nurturer, but you were also a decision-maker, a negotiator, and a provider. Perhaps one of the most remarkable aspects of Viking women's roles was their ability to choose their husbands. In a society that prized strength, honor, and loyalty, women had the right to refuse marriage proposals, to choose their own partners, and to have a say in who they would spend their lives with. It was a power that granted them a certain level of control over their destiny, a power that was for its time extraordinary. As a Viking woman, you would have been expected to marry, but you had the right to decide when and to whom. The process wasn't one of blind submission or mere negotiation. It was a partnership. The idea of love and respect was fundamental in these unions, and it wasn't uncommon for a woman to select her husband based on his qualities, his integrity, and his ability to contribute to the household. This wasn't simply about wealth or social status. It was about mutual respect and trust. Of course, it wasn't always an easy decision. Marrying someone meant committing to a life of shared responsibilities, and while Viking men and women were partners in the truest sense of the word, the responsibilities were often unequal. You, as the wife, would be expected to oversee the household care for the children, manage the food stores, and ensure the survival of your family. Meanwhile, your husband would spend much of his time away, whether raiding, trading, or exploring. The choice you made in a husband was therefore a choice about much more than romantic love. It was a choice about practical support, shared goals, and a partnership that would enable both of you to thrive. As you reflect on the complexities of marriage in Viking society, you realize that your role in the family is much more than that of a caregiver. You are a partner, a strategist, and an equal. You may not have fought in the same battles as the men, but your role is just as essential to the survival of your family, your clan, and your people. And this is where Viking women truly shine. There is a quiet power in the everyday decisions you make, the small acts of strength that go unnoticed by most. You handle the farm, you tend to the animals, you raise the children, and you make decisions that affect not just your household, but the community as a whole. You are a leader in your own right, shaping the future with each passing season. As you think about the future, you can't help but feel a sense of hope. The world may change, the seasons may shift, but your role will always remain vital. The future of Viking society depends on women like you, women who are willing to step up, make tough decisions, and provide the steady leadership that keeps everything moving forward. This power, however, is not without its challenges. As you know, being a woman in the Viking world meant having to navigate a delicate balance between independence and submission, between power and vulnerability. Your role was a unique one, and while it granted you some freedoms, it also came with its own set of expectations. You were expected to bear children, maintain the household, and ensure that your husband's legacy was carried on. And in many ways, you succeeded not just in fulfilling these duties, but in shaping the future of your people. Even as a wife, you were not limited to domestic tasks. In some cases, Viking women were known to be skilled warriors in their own right. While it was not the norm for women to take part in combat, there are stories, legendary or otherwise, of women who donned armor, wielded weapons, and joined their husbands in battle. These women, known as shield maidens, were rare, but their existence speaks to the unique role that Viking women played in the warrior culture. The fact that Viking women could hold such autonomy, could choose their husbands, and could even take part in battle is a testament to the resilience and strength that defined them. Your role in this world was not as passive as it might seem. It was vital, strategic, and full of influence. Your actions shaped the course of Viking history, even if the annals of time have forgotten your name. Now, as you sit by the fire watching the flames dance in the hearth, you are reminded of the legacy you carry. It's not just the legacy of the warriors who fought on the front lines, but the legacy of the women who held the fort at home. It's a legacy of strength, independence, and resilience passed down from one generation to the next. You may never be the subject of songs or sagas, but you know that your contribution is immeasurable. Your choice to marry, to build a family, to lead the household, all of these things have shaped the future of the Viking world in ways that go far beyond what history books can capture. The world you have built is one of balance and strength, of partnership and perseverance. And as long as women like you continue to rise to the occasion, the legacy of the Vikings will never fade. The fire crackles gently, casting a warm glow across the room. The flickering shadows dance against the walls, creating a peaceful rhythm as you settle into the quiet after a long day. This moment where the world outside slows down and everything is still offers a time for reflection, for resting the weary mind and body. You've come so far, and the weight of the day's tasks has softened with the calm of the evening. The children are sleeping soundly in their beds. The house is secure, and for now there is nothing more to do but sit, breathe, and allow the peace to settle around you. As you think back over the years, you realize how much has changed since you first began this journey as a Viking woman. When you were younger, the idea of marriage of partnership seemed like a distant concept, a simple matter of duty and tradition. But now you understand the depth of that bond. Your choice of a husband was a defining moment, a choice that shaped not only your life but the lives of your children and the future of your community. You may never have chosen the path of a warrior, but you've always been a warrior in your own right, fighting for your family, your home, and your way of life. The battles you've faced have been different from those fought on distant shores, but no less significant. Every day you've worked tirelessly to create something lasting. You've nurtured life, protected your loved ones, and ensured that the legacy of your ancestors continues. It's a quiet power, one that hums beneath the surface of daily tasks, but it is the very force that has kept Viking society moving forward through the centuries. In the world you've helped to shape, there is a delicate balance between strength and gentleness, between leadership and care. Viking women like you have always understood this balance, playing an integral role in the survival and success of the Viking people. You've seen it in your mothers, in your sisters, and in the women who came before you, those who passed down the wisdom of their lives, guiding you as you've done for the next generation. As the night grows darker and the stars fill the sky above you, feel the weight of history in your bones. You are a part of something far bigger than yourself, a thread in a tapestry woven by countless hands over generations. The sagas may not sing of your name, but your contribution is etched into the very fabric of the world you've helped to build. Without you and the women like you, Viking society would not have thrived the way it did. It is the quiet strength of women, the ones who held the fort at home, that has ensured the continuity of Viking life. The fire before you burns down to embers, and the peaceful hush of the night surrounds you completely. The world may seem vast and unpredictable, but in this moment there is a sense of contentment, a sense that despite everything you have done, your part. The work may never be done, but for now, everything is in its place. Slowly, your eyelids begin to feel heavier, the gentle rhythm of the night lulling you into a restful state. You've done your duty, you've lived your life with strength and purpose, and now it's time to rest. The story of Viking women of your story continues to ripple through the generations like a soft melody that never quite fades. It's a song of resilience, of partnership, of quiet strength, and it will live on for as long as the stars continue to shine in the sky above. Now dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together.